Where there is a battle happening, there's drama for one, so it's a good story, but there's also a lot of pain. So there's a lot of pain in North Carolina right now. And it's very fresh because so much happened this year with this General Assembly. That's why, in a way, there's an opportunity, because there's a hunger for people to want healing, to do something instead of just feeling alone in their pain. And I've heard people say, and we've been using this phrase too, this is a battle for the soul of our country. In North Carolina, it's taken the form of many fights over many policies. The voting rights issue, women's rights issue, reproductive rights issue, what we do about income inequality, about poverty, unemployment, job creation. I mean, there were many, many fights, but in the end, I think it is about a much bigger question about who we are. What are our rights and what do we owe one another? What is our duty to one another? In North Carolina, you see very clearly this tableau. Who's part of this battle? What are we fighting for? What are the stakes? It's all very well articulated. So we want to document that, tell that story accurately, truthfully, honestly, and then use that as the basis for creating, discussions grounded in reality and not rhetoric.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Put your hands together.
Our web series is an ongoing dialogue we're having with our audience. We put something out, we get feedback. Put another thing out, we get feedback. We want to be very transparent about our role as storytellers who are out to really experiment, figure out whether or not this faith that we have in dialogue is real, whether or not it really does have the kind of impact that we think it can have. And North Carolina, I mean, we're extremely fortunate that not only did we stumble across a great story. When I read this thing that Reverend Barber wrote back in October, something lit up in me. I'm like, this man has something to say. I really want to go meet him. And when he invited us to come back in February for HK on J, I was like, wow, this is not just talk. This man is really bringing people together. This is what it looks like. And when, he says fusion politics, this is what it looks like. And then when they started, engaging in civil disobedience with more Mondays, as things got rougher here, I don't know, I started to really understand the role that we can play here. When people feel like someone is listening, they feel respected, and you can create trust from that. You can build things from that. It's very creative. So it's not just merely talking. I know some people want to dismiss dialogue as just mere talking and not action, right? But talking is action in the context of the democratic process. Deliberation has to be a very vital part of our democratic process. And I think people forget that so much of what we do in politics is actually just communicate. When we post these videos, people watch it, and often it may lead them to a different conclusion, or it may lead them to actually do something, like maybe come to a More Monday event, or see this Republican lawmaker as more sympathetic, more human. None of these things will get resolved if we continue to vilify each other, dehumanize each other, and see each other as objects. We're not going to have villains in the story. The only villain really is an abstract one of people feeling like you can just see others as not fully human, not deserving of your compassion, not deserving of rights. The feature film will have this kind of layer to it so that we're looking at what the subject of our documentation, but it's also going to show how we're putting it together. I think we open on Election Day 2012. We come across the situation in Prince William County where you have lines that go on around the building where people have been waiting for hours. And it turns out Prince William County really was kind of ground zero because it's a swing county and a swing state. And there were these long lines in very critical districts where it's predominantly Democratic. We don't know what the outcome of the election is going to be. We don't know whether or not people are going to actually leave those polling stations. So there's incredible suspense because of these lines. And so unexpectedly, that becomes kind of the beginning of our journey, us going, how could this be right? How could this be part of our democratic process when people have to wait 5 hours? And isn't there something inherently unequal about people in densely populated areas having to wait in really long lines, whereas people who are in rural areas can zip through in 5 minutes? You know, so it starts out with this kind of question like, what is going on with our elections? What is the state of our democracy? And why does it feel so unequal? We really started the road trip part of it with visiting Reverend Barber, where he does put things into historical context. You know, that we made this video, The Third Reconstruction, where he says that is what is happening right now. This is our third attempt at reconstructing the South. The second attempt was the Civil Rights Movement. And then we moved south. We go into the deep South. We went into Alabama. We went to Selma, where the pain is still there, the pain of the struggle and during the Civil Rights Movement. It feels so palpable. This is not history. This is how people live with this constant tension. These events of the past never quite go away. So in some ways, we're haunted by these events. We went to schools that were Black schools, African American schools, during time of segregation. It was incredible because the buildings are in a state of disrepair, but the spirit is still there. I felt the spirit still moving through the buildings, where you can just feel the kind of combination of hope and pain and despair, like all these things that must have transpired in those buildings. They're still there. And it's like down the road from where people live, or you know, it's on their property. I needed to be reminded of that this is true for a lot of people, especially in the South, that they live with this kind of pain, and it's still very fresh. To understand Selma will help us understand why we struggle so much with our division, why we have two very different stories about America. And we have been kind of creating a map, in a way, of where the wounds are. And that's one of the reasons that we went to Selma and Montgomery, Alabama. We also spent time in Detroit because we wanted to look at the Great Migration and white flight and understand why that city is at the place it is right now, in this kind of state of collapse. If you don't know like the details of the history, and this is why history is so important, then you can make up an explanation. It must be because, you know, these African American elected officials were corrupt and they couldn't govern, and they can't govern themselves, and it led to bankruptcy. Unless you really understand history accurately, I think we're going to learn the wrong lessons. Part of our job as filmmakers is to figure out how to tell the history in a way that makes people think, okay, this is why we have what we have, and okay, I don't want to repeat that, so I'm going to do this. So it makes people make better decisions.